It
Hi, everybody, welcome to this week's Aggressive Progressive. We got a full panel. I'm joined by the Raging Agent Steve-O. Hi, Steve.
Hey there, Jimmy.
I'm with Rod Placone, also from Get Your News On with Rod. Hi, Rod.
How's it going, Jimmy?
Also here is the miserable liberal, Steph Zamorano. Hi, Steph.
I'm miserable, Jimmy.
So we got a lot of stuff to talk about today. In the second half of today's show, we're going to shift into podcast mode. And what does that mean? You're going to find out what that means. But today we're going to talk about the Syrian gas attack, and it's really turned me around. I think we should bomb now, and because that's what fixes gas attacks. I mean, it's just all you have to do is bomb. They killed some people with gas, and now we have to kill some people with bombs, and that's what Jesus would do. Anyway, so we're going to talk about that.
I like your foreign policy, Jimmy.
That's my foreign policy. It's Jesus's foreign policy. So we're going to talk about that today. We're going to talk about, there's a company that employs homeless people to make coats for other homeless people. We'll talk about that. Plus what's happening in Gaza. Chris Hayes actually covered it, what's happening with Israel and Gaza. Chris Hayes at MSNBC actually covered it. And so that's more of a news story than the news story to me. And we're going to take a look at that too. Plus, the Facebook guy, what's his name, Zuckerberg. I'm never sure if it's Zucker or Zuckerberg. I get those two mixed.
It's Zucker and Berg put together, Zuckerberg.
Zuckerberg, okay.
Zuckerman is someone different. That's Zuckerman's famous pig, that was Charlotte's Web.
Oh.
And Zucker is a guy who runs CNN.
Okay,
Yeah.
Jeff
different
Zucker.
people, Jeff Zucker.
Okay, what about Zimmerman? Now that's a nice deli in Michigan. What's the name of this town that I go to in Michigan where it has Zimmerman's?
Ann Arbor.
Ann Arbor. I love Ann Arbor. I haven't been back there.
Road guys know that.
Yeah, I love Roger Feeney. Used to book me there. He's a great guy. Anyway, nobody cares about any of this stuff, but
there's more of that in the podcast portion.
Podcast portion coming up. We're going to get to that. My glasses are dirty. So let's talk about the Syrian gas attack. So you're tuning into the Aggressive Progressives. So you're a little more on it than the regular TYT viewer and the regular establishment viewer. That's what I like to think. Our viewers are the smartest. So you're probably, when I say that, it's because when this video drops on the main channel, it'll probably get half likes and half dislikes because they're not clued in as we are. And here it is, I'm gonna clue them in. So let's remember that every war since World War II has been a fake war, meaning it was brought on by what Eisenhower said, the undue influence of the military-industrial complex. Okay, so we know that Vietnam was a false flag, the Gulf of Tonkin, that was pretend. And then there was another war after that. It was called the Gulf War, the first Gulf War, right? And that was when Iraq invaded Kuwait. And then we, out of the goodness of our hearts, decided to go help the Kuwaiti people because we're good people, we're humanitarians. But turns out half the country didn't want to go into that war. Why do we care about Kuwait? Why do we care about Iraq? Why don't we let the Middle East settle their own problems? Why doesn't Saudi Arabia and all the Arab states get together and figure it out? So they had to do something to change that mindset in America. And this is what they did. Here we go.
Iraq attacks Kuwait,
claiming the Kuwaitis are slant drilling into Iraq's oil fields. U.S. President George Herbert Walker Bush pushes for a land war against Iraq. But polls show the U.S. public is split 50-50 on that idea. Then comes this eyewitness testimony before a congressional committee from a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl. The claim is she cannot be identified for fear of reprisals.
While I was there, I saw the Iraqi soldiers come into the hospital with guns. They took the babies out of the incubators, and left the children to die on the cold floor.
The U.S. public is outraged. The result? Support for land war zooms. It's a turning point. Desert Storm is launched. 135,000 Iraqis are killed. An estimated 1 million Iraqis, many of them children and old people, then die as a result of 10 years of sanctions. One small problem. There never were any incubator baby deaths, not one. The Canadian Broadcasting Corporation's investigative flagship program, The Fifth Estate, reveals the girl to be the Kuwaiti ambassador's daughter, given her lines and coached in acting by the giant American PR firm Hill & Knowlton. It's one phase in a $10 million joint U.S.-Kuwaiti campaign of deception. This man is lying.
I myself buried 14 newborn babies that had been taken from their incubators.
This man is lying.
And they had kids in incubators, and they were thrown out of the incubators so that Kuwait could be systematically dismantled.
There were a lot of people who participated in a conspiracy. Yes, an out-and-out conspiracy of fake organizations, false documents, fraud, and disinformation. So, if a new man named Bush is in the White House and helps engineer a brazen deception in order to achieve global geopolitical goals, as well as domestic and personal ones, it wouldn't be a first, would it?
So that was the first Gulf War. So George Herbert Walker Bush lied us into that war. And that was a big conspiracy that we just debunked, that we just uncovered. And turns out that girl was the ambassador's daughter from Kuwait. I remember when that happened. This was before YouTube. This was before the internet. All you had was the New York Times, Washington Post, and then the establishment news. That's all you had. And so you saw that, and I was like, come on. Why would they do that to babies? What do they get out of that? The babies aren't fighting them. It didn't make any sense to me at the time, and I was just a jag-off college student. And now, well, we see why it didn't make any sense. And then the next war was the weapons of mass destruction. So what do you think about that? Let me throw it to the panel since it's our podcast day. What do you think about that first video? And can maybe relate it to what's happening right now?
So I'm not a historian. So everything that happened prior to 2000, I wasn't really paying attention. So I don't know. But yes, do I believe that folks lied to get us into wars? Absolutely, because we saw it. For me, my awakening in this realm of politics was the second Iraq war, the war that we had on the heels of 9/11, and that one we had a lot more access to information because there was the internet. It wasn't just a couple of media companies, and I just couldn't believe that we're actually going into war. I recall a couple of days before we actually launched the shock and awe, I was on the phone with Jank, and Jank said, do you really think we're gonna go into war in Iraq? And I said, no way, that's crazy. I was like, they had nothing to do with 9/11. It's just another random country, and we're gonna go to war against them because of what? Because of 9/11? That makes no sense. And he's like, but we have our carriers right there in the Gulf. I said, that's just for show. We're just flexing our muscles because it's so crazy and so over the top irrational to attack a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. I just couldn't believe that our government would do that. So when we did, I was absolutely appalled and shocked. And it made me question everything that happened before. So with respect to this video and what happened in the first Gulf War, I don't know, okay, because I didn't research it. But I do know that in the latter stages of my life so far, there has been systematic lies by the government, especially when it comes to war. And the way the media coalesces around the war rally is unbelievable. It doesn't matter if you're left, right, or middle. On television, they're all pro-war. And it's always that way. And the last missile strike that we did in Syria, I mean, you saw Brian Williams, Fareed Zakaria.
We're going to show that.
People that I respected, at times.
At times, no doubt.
At times in the past. I mean, especially Fareed Zakaria. I really respected some of his writings. I can believe the way they're cheerleading it. I mean, at best, you should be, grief-stricken, thinking we must do this. Many people are going to die, but it's for the greater good. But here's what I wouldn't do. Wow, majestic, it's beautiful, it's wonderful. Today, Trump became presidential. It's weird. I mean, our obsession with war and the way we think that more war is always a position of strength and the right thing to do, and that anything other than this willingness to go into war is a sign of weakness somehow.
I couldn't agree more, Ron.
Yeah, I mean,
did you know about that, by the way, what the first Gulf War?
I mean, I was not cognizant of it when it was going on.
Were you like 6 years old?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty young. But my political awakening was the second Iraq war too, because my friends were going over there. And I said, why the hell are we over there? And then about a year later, Fox came out, and whoa, okay, this is a world I wasn't aware of. And yeah, the media, there's that phrase in Texas, fool me once, shame on you, but you don't get fooled again. Well, the media is helping to do the fooling because of who their owners are.
And Steph?
Well, the whole thing is I'm looking for our peace department. Do we have a peace department any longer in the United States?
No.
It seems that we are just a war machine. In the meantime, we're devastating one country after another, and we're abandoning our people right here in America. Where's our health care? Where's our access to free education? Where are our access to lovely homes for people that are in desperate situations? So the idea that our government can actually provide for the people, it can. And the will of the people, they want it. But it seems like our government wants more war.
We're up against a break. We'll be right back with more of this and a lot more in just 1 minute. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Aggressive Progressives. I'm here with Steve-O, Ron Placone, and Steph Zamorano, and we're talking about the way our country always rushes into war. We're in the middle of doing it right now. I've been warning you. This is the effect of attacking Trump from the right. You attack Trump from the right, which the left has been doing all along since he's been president. You got to have a more muscular response. And now you're getting it. And now we're going to start World War frickin' III. Because I'm going to tell you something. I had Oliver Stone on the Jimmy Dore show last week, and he just did interviews with Putin, and he says that Putin is not messing around. That when Trump threatens, that he's bloviating. But when Putin says something, he's not joking. So when he says, we will retaliate if you mess with us, and by the way, they now have nuclear submarines that have nuclear engines, which that's a brand new thing. So we shouldn't mess around with a nuclear submarine. Why does that make you laugh?
Because what difference does it make what the engine is made of?
I don't know, but it's important.
Okay.
I don't know why that's important.
I believe you, but it's funny. You seem very persuaded by that. Not only are the warheads nuclear, but so is the engine.
Well, my point is that they're innovating in their weaponry.
And in those subs, their microwaves also nuclear powered.
My point was that they're still innovating.
I hear you.
With their weapons and nuclear weapons too. So that's my point. Now so what we were showing you before was how the first Gulf War was a lie. And it was by George Bush's dad, George Herbert Walker Bush. They lied us into that war, and that was a big lie. And now here's the last Gulf War, which was the awakening for people like Steve-O and Ron Placone, and honestly myself. I was also walking around pinching myself like, wait a minute, we just go to war against a country that's not attacking us, and by the way, didn't have a way to defend itself against us. And so here is,
I have to interrupt because I just have to remind everybody that we haven't had a declared war since World War II.
This is true.
So these aren't declared wars. These are like ways we can spread democracy, Jimmy.
Yes. They called Korea policing action, and now everything we're doing now is on what they call the AUMF, the authorization to use military force, which the Congress gave the president, and that's supposed to be so he could fight terrorism. Okay, so here is Robert Mueller talking. Now, Robert Mueller's in the news because he's Mr. Integrity leading the investigation into Donald Trump, and he's going to find some financial misdealings with Trump. And I bet you if we put an investigator on Robert Mueller, we'd find criminal activity in Robert Mueller's life. Oh my God, I just found some. Here he is lying to the Congress and the American people to lead us into a war. Here we go.
As Director Tenet has pointed out, Secretary Powell presented evidence last week that Baghdad has failed to disarm its weapons of mass destruction, willfully attempting to evade and deceive the international community. Our particular concern is that Saddam Hussein may supply terrorists with biological, chemical, or radiological material.
Oh, so that was the last Gulf War. So we showed you the first one, how they lied us into that one. They got a 15-year-old Kuwaiti girl to cry in front of Congress. And now they had Robert Mueller, Mr. Integrity, lying to the American people once again to get us to go to war in the Gulf again. And now he's supposed to be Mr. Integrity investigating Trump. You put an investigator on Robert Mueller, he'll be in jail in a week, okay? The guy's a criminal. And now back to you. So let me just go through to the panel on that. What do you think about that? The exact same people, Steve, the exact same people are now leading us into this. And now they're supposed to be the rehabilitation of these criminals because of Donald Trump. And now we're going to go to another war because Donald Trump is weak. So what do you have to say about Mueller?
Well, on the issue of Mueller, I actually compartmentalize it. So he could have been part of the neocon scam to lead us into the Iraq war then, and he could be a totally by the books prosecutor on a particular case today, whether that be Trump or someone else. I think those two things are consistent. You can be both. Maybe you can't. I don't know. That's not up to me to judge. I don't really care, to be honest. Okay. But with respect to your point about the rehabilitation of all the neocons, absolutely. Look, Trump's a bad guy, and I disagree with him on 99.9% of things, right?
Yeah.
But the way we are just foaming at the mouth in our attempts to diminish Trump, to impeach Trump, to somehow get rid of him, that we foolishly harken back to the good old days, the so-called good old days of normal Republicans, the kinds that just, the neocon types who just fly us into a war and cause, trillions of dollars of financial damage to ourselves, up to millions or maybe more, at least 1 million Iraqis, tens of thousands of our own soldiers, dying and just unleashing havoc in the region. I mean, we're still, reaping, the seeds that we sowed with that war, with ISIS and all the instability there. So I agree with you, Jimmy. I mean, Trump is bad, but it doesn't mean to pretend that everyone else that preceded him was angelic. It's ridiculous.
Trump is what I try to point out. Trump is the symptom of a much bigger problem. It's like Trump is a liver spot, and you have cancer on your liver, and people are trying to put an ointment on the liver spot and trying to convince us that if we get rid of that liver spot, your trouble is gone. No, you still have cancer on your liver, and there's going to be another liver spot. There's going to be another Trump, and so it's not Trump. The problem, so I'm showing you the cancer. And so that's why people keep asking me, Jimmy, why don't you go after Trump? I'm going after the cause, not the symptom. Ron?
Well, and Trump is a Republican minus subtlety. That's all he is.
Yes!
All of his policies are just general Republican policies. Are they awful? Abso-freaking-lutely.
Yes.
But here's what they look like without any amount of subtlety attached to them. And Trump's incompetence can actually be a good thing. Do you think if we had a President Pence right now, he would have let that spending bill through without funding for that abysmal idea of the wall? No, he wouldn't have. He would have actually probably read it. Trump didn't. So sometimes this incompetence, it's a good thing.
Steph?
I'm tired of people talking about impeaching Trump. It's meaningless. Who cares? Let's move on with some real business. But I'm really happy that the Democrats, when they were asked to increase the budget in the military by $80 billion, that they didn't.
Oh no, they did.
Oh, wait a minute. They did.
But only after caving on DACA. Keep that in mind.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. So to me, this whole thing about, I find it interesting. At the same time that we're increasing our military expense budget, we are decreasing and underfunding education.
Yo, they're down to 4 days a week in Oklahoma for education. But as Steve O points out, we're spending $200 billion more a year on military than we were at the height of the Iraq war. That's a 40% increase in our military budget after those wars had wound down. But yet, we don't have money for education. 29 million people still don't have health care. They don't have water in Flint.
So I just want to stop there for a second and just talk about that a bit more, because think about that. If we want to put the nicest polish on our war policy and declare Iraq a huge success, which it's not, but let's just say we can say that. All right, so it was a huge success because we spent so much. We spent $500 billion in 2005, 2006. But now, after that great success, we just spent $200 billion more. Wow, that success sucks. What does that mean 5 years later, 10 years later? I mean, this budget is a runaway train. It's never ever going to be smaller. It'll only be bigger. It'll only be bigger. And if you have a bigger budget, you have to justify the budget. So what do? You prosecute more crimes. You invent more enemies. So this is the path that we're on. So American people should know today that our tax dollars are going to be, our taxes will be cut on the rich and powerful. Everyone wants to be taxed to fund these wars. And there's going to be more war, and there'll be a bigger Pentagon budget every single year. There's no turning back unless we take the government back and make the government accountable to the people, which honestly, I'm very pessimistic about.
I'm very pessimistic, and let's remember that when Barack Obama won the presidency in 2008, there were people like Barney Frank who were calling for a 25% reduction in the Pentagon because we all knew it was bloated, and we all know those wars were winding down. And they asked Barney Frank, Barney, where do you want to cut? What's your 25%? He goes, I don't know. I haven't really looked at it, but that sounds like a good starting point. Of course it does. I would say we reduce it by 50%. And what could we do with that money? Let's just say we take the 40% increase that we've gone into after the height. That 40%, that $200 billion. You could send everyone to college for free in the country. Everyone to college for free. You could end homelessness in the United States. That costs $20 billion. So you could send everybody to college for free, end homelessness, and you would still have $100 billion a year left over for shits and giggles. That's how much money we're spending on the military. We could end homelessness. By the way, we could then end world hunger. That costs $30 billion. We could end world hunger, homelessness, everybody goes to college for free, and still have $70 billion left over. That's how much we're spending on the military industrial complex. Think about that, think about it. And the Democrats want you to think that the problem still is Donald Trump. The problem is the corporate capture of our government that is screwing everybody except the 1%. And that's why we got Trump. And we'll be right back in 1 minute with the last gas attack that they did in Syria and how the media covered it and what was the end result of it. We'll be back in just a minute and we'll tell you then.